Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We aren't just tracing the timeline of a famous historical figure, we are deconstructing a mindset. A mindset that proves, hands down, that no matter where you start out in life, your future is shaped by your courage, your hustle, and your absolute refusal to quit. We're looking at the life of A.P.J. Abdul Kalam. It's a truly cinematic story about ordinary beginnings and the extraordinary grit it takes to achieve something phenomenal. Okay, let's dive into this. Just look at this stark contrast. It's almost hard to wrap your head around, right? On one side, we have a young boy peddling newspapers just to help his family survive. On the other, the revered People's President of India and the nation's iconic missile man. The distance between those two realities is staggering. I mean, most people would look at that starting point and say, no way, getting to that ending is literally impossible. But this massive contrast proves a really foundational truth. Monumental success is fundamentally about mindset, not privilege. It's about what you build inside yourself when the outside world gives you nothing.
So, to map out this epic journey, we're going to trace four distinct phases. His childhood years in Rameswaram, his college years studying aerospace, his early career dealing with space program failure and triumph, and finally, his later career as the missile man.
Section 1. Bigger than your circumstances.
Picture this. We're in the coastal town of Rameswaram, down in Tamil Nadu. Kalam's family relied entirely on his father's small boat, and they faced really tough financial challenges every single day. There was zero safety net, no shortcuts, absolutely no special advantages, and definitely no wealth to fund some grand vision of the future. So what did his daily routine look like? Well, while most kids his age were sleeping in or just playing, he was already up. He was out there selling newspapers before the school bell even rang. And when the school day ended, he didn't just kick back. He dedicated hours to reading and learning, because he truly believed education was the key to a better future. While others were comfortable, he was already putting in the sweat equity to lay the groundwork for his life.
And that brings us to the core driver of his youth. He had a dream bigger than his circumstances. I actually want you to pause and reflect on that for a second. Think about your own life. Your own perceived limitations, those barriers you feel are holding you back right now. Kalam might have carried newspapers in his hands, but he carried something far heavier and far more powerful in his heart, a vision for his future that completely dwarfed his financial poverty.
Section 2. The spark of curiosity. Now, grit is great, but determination needs a direction, right? It needs a target. How does a boy from a tiny fishing town decide he wants to conquer the skies? Well, it all comes down to a catalyst, an everyday event that sparks profound change. For Kalam, this catalyst was incredibly simple: a teacher explaining to his class how birds fly. Now, for most of the kids in that room, this was probably just another standard science lesson to memorize and instantly forget. But for Kalam, it was a total revelation. Watching those birds soar filled him with this deep, incredible fascination. That single, ordinary classroom lesson ignited a lifelong dream of working in aviation and science. The idea just spread like wildfire in his mind.
Section 3. Surviving the pressure test.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it shows that success requires immense sacrifice. Moving into his college years to study aerospace engineering, Kalam was thrown into a grueling crucible. Financial hardship, crazy academic pressure, self-doubt. One specific defining moment really hits the nail on the head here. A professor handed him a highly demanding engineering project with a completely impossible deadline. And the stakes? Very serious. Failure meant huge consequences for his academic future. Faced with an impossible timeline like that, most of us would probably complain, make excuses, or just throw in the towel. Not Kalam. His response was total sacrifice. He gave up sleep, he gave up leisure, he worked day and night until that project was successfully completed. He absolutely refused to let the pressure break him.
And that experience cemented a belief he'd carry for the rest of his life. Pressure does not break great people, it reveals their true strength. Think about that for a second. How do you handle the intense pressures in your own daily life? When the deadline is looming and the stakes are incredibly high, do you crack under the weight, or do you let that pressure reveal what you're truly capable of? For Kalam, pressure forged his work ethic into something completely unbreakable.
Section 4. The power of public failure. So this unbreakable work ethic ultimately propels him right into India's space and defense programs. It's the exact opportunity he'd visualized since he was a kid watching those birds. But success didn't just magically arrive. One of India's early satellite launch missions, a massive project Kalam was deeply involved in, ended in total failure. The rocket literally crashed.
Years of meticulous preparation? Gone. The entire nation was deeply disappointed, and the harsh critics came out swinging, questioning the viability of the whole program. Let's be real here. For most people, an embarrassment of this massive, very public magnitude, that's the end of the road. But not Abdul Kalam. He had a completely different playbook. Here's his exact mindset shift, broken down into actionable steps for any of us facing a huge setback. Step 1. Instead of giving up, he chose to learn. Step 2. Instead of deflecting and pointing fingers, he took full responsibility. Step 3. Instead of wallowing in the failure, he focused purely on improvement. He and his team got right back to work. They put every single mistake under a microscope, analyzed it, and worked even harder than they had before the crash. Fast forward a few months, and they attempt another launch. And this time, absolute resounding success. That triumphant relaunch completely erased the devastating rocket crash. Instantly, the very same critics who had publicly doubted the program were now cheering and celebrating its massive achievement.
Section 5. Becoming the Missile Man. And this brilliantly illustrates how reacting properly to failure became the ultimate turning point for India's future in science and technology. By showing that a crash wasn't an end, but just a lesson to be learned, he paved the way for decades of innovation. After that success, his ascent was simply unstoppable. He went on to lead absolutely crucial national defense projects. He completely revolutionized India's missile development, which is literally how he earned the famous title, the Missile Man of India. And eventually, that newspaper boy from Rameswaram became the deeply beloved historical figure we know as the People's President. But remember, none of these milestones, none of this legacy would exist without that unbreakable drive he forged in his youth and tested in his career.
Which leave us with one final thought to reflect on for this explainer. In life, your rockets will inevitably crash. You are going to face your own impossible deadlines, a lack of resources, and maybe even your own very public failures. The question isn't how to avoid the crash. The question is, when your rocket crashes, how will you respond? Will you point fingers, or will you take responsibility, analyze the mistakes, and rebuild your future? The mindset of A.P.J. Abdul Kalam gives us the perfect blueprint. The rest is entirely up to you.